Thank you very much. I thought we'd talk about the new legislation that came in last Friday night, seems a long time ago now, which is about the coronavirus job retention scheme. So the Chancellor announced that with this scheme, 80% of wages of workers who would otherwise be laid off or made redundant would be funded by the government. So it's not a loan. So companies don't need to worry about getting into further debt. It is a grant. And the idea will be that you will amend the status of your employees to furlough. So that's a new word that's come into our language all of a sudden. And by doing that, you will then be able to claim back that money at the end. They're saying at the end of April. I'm hoping it will be sooner because some of my clients are already talking about how do I afford to pay people for March and April. So I'm sure they're all working very, very hard at the moment to try and get this portal up and running so that people can be furloughed. Clients are already furloughing people as we speak, and it is an alternative to redundancy. So I suppose the best way to think about it is if a company was going to cease working or the work had stopped and you were thinking about making redundancies, this is an alternative to doing that. The other thing to think about is that if there should be a contractual right to have this, to enforce it, and if there isn't, which in most contracts of employment there wouldn't be, what you do need to still do is make sure that those that you furlough, if you're going to pick and choose who that is a fair and transparent process. And equally, that those people are consulted with. Now, consultation doesn't need to last too long. It will be a simple case of explaining the situation to them and then talking through what the alternatives are, and the alternatives could be that they go on to unpaid leave, they take furlough, which is 80% of salary, or they're made redundant. So the alternatives are fairly black and white, so most people probably will accept the furlough arrangement to take 80%. Now, employers can top up the 80% to 100%, so they can pay the extra 20% if they wish to, but they don't have to. And that's made quite clear on all the information that the government has presented. They've done a very small paragraph for employees, and they've also done one for employers. And on the employees website part, it does say that they don't have to, so that is clear. What else to tell you about that scheme? At the moment, we don't know whether that 80% is a gross amount or a net amount. And we don't know whether things such as employers' NIC contributions and pension contributions are in that fee, that 80% as well. So that's an unknown. The system to make this happen is also unknown. That's what the HMRC are currently building. Just checking my notes. Some people have put people onto what's called short time working, which is basically reducing their hours. This furloughing scheme, the job retention scheme, is not about that. So you could end up having people who are perhaps on reduced hours, working 50% of their normal week, earning less salary than they would under furlough. Again, that's a very difficult pill to swallow for those who are working 50% and those that are sitting at home getting 80%. More legislation may come up about reduced hours. Equally, they haven't explained whether you could do 1 week on, 1 week off furlough as well. That's unknown. What else? One question often asked is whether directors are included in this scheme, and if they are on PAYE, yes, they could be furloughed themselves. But if they are taking any money via dividends, then they wouldn't be classed as employees, and therefore furlough would not apply. Businesses that this applies to is small, large, non-profit and charity. So basically any organisation could apply to go through a furlough process with their employees. Oh, another question that often asked, can they do any work during furlough? And the answer is no. Again, the government guidance, as much as we have at the moment, is very clear that no work can be undertaken once somebody is furloughed. Hence the question that people do keep asking, could they do 1 week on, 1 week off, depending on whether more work is coming in. But they're very, very clear that once you're furloughed, you should not be undertaking any work. Furlough lasts for 3 months, and they've said that start would be 1st of March, so that takes us through to the end of May. They may extend the time that furlough or the job retention scheme is available, but obviously that's a watch this space depending on what goes on with the virus. I think that's probably a very whistle-stop tour of the job retention scheme. I'm more than happy to try and answer any questions. I know we've got Mark on, so I'm sure he'll help me if I'm stuck. And equally, if anybody wants to talk about anything else to do with employees, such as remote working, which is obviously new to a lot of people at the moment, SSP questions, all of those sort of things, more than happy to take any questions or any concerns that people have.
You did say that people on furlough could volunteer, so they can do volunteer work, can't they?
My understanding is yes, it's about being paid. The other question that often comes up is somebody may only work, I don't know, 2 days a week for you, and you want to furlough them. What happens to the rest of their work if they say work in Aldi? My understanding is they can be furloughed from one company, but we don't entirely know the implications of secondary employment and whether you could be furloughed from the other one or whether obviously you can continue to work. Again, that's a bit unknown, but voluntary work I would definitely say is fine.
So, and 0-hour contracts, I guess that's just not included in anything, is it?
No, they have talked about 0 hours. They've added workers now. That was announced, I think, Tuesday, that casual workers are now also included, and that would be based on an average of their normal weekly pay. Now, at the moment, that period would be a 12-week average, but from the 6th of April, that actually turns into a 52-week reference period. So my advice would be, if anybody is looking at casual workers at the moment, I would look at it from a 52-week period. It's only a few days away now, the 6th of April. And part of what this is all about is about the goodwill, trying to treat people right and do the best by them that you can, and equally about hopefully coming out the other end with people who want to still work for you, because how you treat them now will be very important.
Okay. Mark, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to get our head around is how they're going to assess a week's pay or a month's pay, or what is the actual pay they're going to base the 80% on, and when is the reference period?
Yeah, so from a point of view of casual people, or anybody?
Anybody. I mean, will they use a reference point, say like February salary or something like that, to avoid people inflating salaries now and then going on to furlough?
It's a good point, because it has been talked about, yeah, increasing salaries just so that they can get higher. I don't know. It's a really good point, and I haven't heard that one come up before, actually.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer.
As I understand it, when the portal is available,
yeah,
what they will end up doing is you will have to go on and put various employee details in, and then answer a number of questions. And that is going to be quite interesting, because when everybody tries to go on there at the same time when it's launched, I can imagine the thing grinding to a halt. So it's going to take some time through April and into May probably for people to get on the scheme and get the money reimbursed. Yeah, in the meantime, you probably have to pay the employees as normal, and then get the money back?
Yeah, I don't know if you've done any furloughs yet. I've done a couple already, and that's the conversation I've had is, can you afford to pay people for March as normal, and then maybe if they agree, go on to furlough from the 1st of April, or you're looking at roughly 3 weeks of normal pay in March, and then obviously 1 week at 80% in March if they agree in time for you to do the payroll, because obviously they've announced it right at the sort of cut-off time for a lot of people's payrolls who are paid at the end of the month. So you could obviously reduce it to 80% at this point once you've got agreement, and then hopefully, you know, once the reimbursement will happen, but it's still about a company's ability to pay for both March and April salaries as well. And there are some other schemes out there if firms are struggling. There's the business interruption loan scheme, I think, and things like that. So there are ways around it, but again, I don't know how inundated they are with people requesting them. Obviously people might not want to go to their banks to get loans, and things like that. So yeah, it's difficult. It's very, very difficult.
One of the other avenues for businesses with they've got small businesses with premises that get full rate relief. I think there is going to be the money that's coming from the rate authority, so it would be South Northants or the borough or the county, will actually meant to write to all companies that have 100% rate relief to offer them the facility of this. It is a grant, so it's not repayable. But again, I don't know what, it's up to 10,000, but it might just be 10,000, or it might just be a sliding scale depending on the size of your business or whatever.
Yeah.
Help with rent, which takes that particular headache away when people are worried about having to pay rent in this period, and then that is one of the factors that is meaning that they're going to have to let staff go.
Absolutely, and there's the VAT relief and things like that. So there's lots of schemes available, but it's sort of getting access to them quickly, and I don't know how quickly they happen and what the application process is and things like that. But yeah, it's a bit of a headache for companies at the moment, and sometimes they're having to make very, very quick decisions depending on whether they've actually had to close recently or whether they're able to keep going as well.
Jess has got a question for you, Sue.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Sue. Thank you very much for clarifying things. I think for me the most relevant thing is maybe reduced hours, although not as it stands necessarily. It is a moving situation, and the thing that's kind of frustrating is, like you say, it's a bitter pill to swallow, because if there are any measures that would be most relevant, it might be cutting hours, and it won't necessarily be definable on the 6th of April, because as things progress, our clients might change, which then impacts staff hours, etc. So that's the main area that I'm focusing on, really. And I wondered if you've got any idea when there might be an update to any legislation, or whether that's just we'll see what happens. Is there a lot of noise being made? Like, what about reduced hours? How will you support that? Surely that's better for the government rather than 80%.
I know. I think my view is that since the announcement last Friday night, which wasn't great timing for most businesses, 5:30 on a Friday night, I'm sure that there'll be lots of business experts and directors of companies have been twisting the government's ear over the last few days about needing clarification on things as to, you know, whether the figure is gross net, what happens about directors, what happens about casual employees, which has obviously been updated. So that one has changed since last Friday. That one has been added. You know, all of these things, that the detail of how it will actually work, I believe they are working really hard. I believe that the Chancellor is updating tomorrow about potentially something for the self-employed. So you never know, there may be an update on the job retention scheme and the questions that have come in from others about, you know, what happens if you just reduce hours and things like that. This scheme is, as it's called, a job retention scheme. So I suppose their argument would be, if you're able to work hours, you're not being made redundant. But I know that won't be any comfort to somebody who's on 50% and working, to somebody who's sat at home on 80%. And that's the difficulty, that's the reality of the situation.
It feels like furlough is really built around hospitality and retail, and potentially the travel industry. The people who the doors are closed, so there is no job.
I mean, I've got a number of clients who are using it, and all different industries, to be honest. One transport industry thought they were going to be doing it, and then basically got the call that they could continue to work, and they were just about to start consultations. So it changes, I suppose, equally every day, and equally some of them have been saying, well, it will depend on how much income comes in at the end of this month as well, because they're relying on their clients to pay them, and that might not happen.
Okay, any other questions, comments from anybody?
Yeah, I was just going to pass another comment there on what that dialogue we've just had.
Yeah.
It definitely is not just aimed at the hospitality and the other industries that have effectively been closed down, because it's every business has some impact from that, because they may have clients in hospitality, for example. So the impact is felt throughout the whole economy, and I think it is just a job retention tool to try to stop people, the knee-jerk reaction of laying people off that never then come back. Because the more people that are employed, the more money is in the economy, and the more money people spend, and it's a circular scenario. I think what we found is that people are quite receptive to furloughing, because they realise that it is an alternative to them losing their job.
Yeah.
I think that is where we've dealt with several clients who have been looking at this, and not one of them has said that anybody has objected. They've all been quite receptive to it, because everybody is aware of the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another area I think you were going to speak about, Sue, which was about people working from home and lone working, etc., remote working. Because clearly, sorry, you carry on.
No, carry on.
So clearly, when people go to work, what work gives people is income, a sense of purpose, and also a social network. Those are sort of the three aspects that people get from working. Well, we're taking away the social network largely by making people work from home, and then they're part of a different social network, which probably isn't conducive to working. But what we're doing by keeping things moving, we're actually still giving them the purpose of actually going to work and actually doing a job, and actually feeling that they're worth something. So I think it's anything that we can do to keep people working, even if it's is a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Working from home now, for a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever done that. So for some, it's quite difficult. One of my colleagues finds it quite difficult to work from home. She actually likes the distractions and social interaction of an office. So she's actually finding working from home really difficult. Others absolutely love it. And everybody is different. I would encourage people to use the technology that's available, to have regular virtual tea breaks and wine o'clocks near the end of the day and things like that. Obviously meetings face to face. Exactly. Yeah, I'm on water. I thought I'd better be good and be on water. Anyway, so anything that you can do to keep that going. WhatsApp is brilliant. So set up a WhatsApp group for a little bit of banter, for a few jokes and things like that, for checking in. I think as a owner of a business or a leader or a manager, checking in with people. So don't just rely on the virtual cuppers and the WhatsApp, but give people an actual call, see how they're actually feeling, see how their family is. Again, what you do now will stand you in good stead for when we get through this, and how they feel at the end of it. And to sort of, you're not going to be experts on everything, but use the network that you have to talk to other people. So if somebody is finding things challenging, Do you have an employee assistance program that you could refer them to? Do you have any mental health first aiders that they could talk to? You know, everybody is different, and it's just about being available and listening to people. So communication is huge and always really important. So what you do, so how you do things at the moment is just as important as what you do. And then it's things like for people actually working from home, think about a routine. So try to get into a routine, try to get up at a similar time each day. Do get dressed. I know that potentially under the desks, we could be like newsreaders, we could be wearing heaven knows what. But try and get dressed, try and feel that you're going to work is a good idea. The novelty soon wears off of wearing your pajamas and being on a video call and things like that. Make sure that we are allowed out once a day. So make sure that you do go out. It's beautiful at the moment. So take your lunch breaks, take your phone with you if you need to, and chat to your colleagues and friends. That's always good. Try to, again, it's really difficult at the moment because a lot of people are doing childcare and schooling, so balancing the two. So managers who, you know, I think the 9 to 5 has sort of disappeared, but don't be too hard on people who are perhaps, they're doing their work, but they're doing it at different times of the day. That might allow them to spend time with their families or to school their children, but they're still getting their work done. So measure, you know, if you're worried, you know, it's a measurement of production, not when they're available, and presenteeism and things like that. So I think all sort of normal rules almost go out the window with this, because it's, as the word of the time is, unprecedented. So those would be my sort of top tips. But I'm sure all of us have got top tips for working from home and looking after people and things like that. But you know, check in with people quite regularly and make sure they're okay. And doing it by video allows you to see sort of the whites of their eyes, so that you can really see if they're okay, or whether it's, you know, on a phone, you only get part of it. You don't get the body language, you don't get the eyes, you just hear the words that they're saying.
Nadine's got a question which pops into my mind. I think we were talking to Jess. It's like, can you have furlough for some staff and not others? Can you mix and match?
Yes, you can. That's about why what we think will happen is at some point going forward, when all this is over, what HMRC might want to do is basically see evidence of the process that you went through, maybe, or even the communication that you had, any letters that you had, things like that, to make sure that everybody did do it properly and people aren't abusing the system. We don't know that, but HMRC often sort of put things in place after the event. So it's about what's your fair and reasonable process for some people needing to work and some don't. So a client I had today was going to furlough all staff apart from an accounts person. This accounts person was actually a vulnerable person. They're in that bracket, so they were going to be working from home. They couldn't actually work from home because they didn't have any equipment, but they were critical to the ongoing business, to make sure, even though everybody else was furloughed, this person needed to keep going because they were the accounts person and they needed to know what money was coming in and things like that. The furloughing hasn't happened because the business is being told that they can continue, but equally the other person still, even though they're at home, they're able to work from home, they just need to be self-isolating. So that's going to happen. So that was an example of, yes, picking and choosing for a fair and reasonable reason, but potentially always document why you've made those decisions, just in case they come back to haunt us afterwards.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Mark actually want to go because he's just finished his wine, so he'll need to top it up. So he's happy for this to end as soon as possible now. Any more for any more? No, I think we're done, Sue. So thanks ever so much, Sue, for giving up your time tonight. Just to brief us on what's going on. It sounds like it's an ever-moving feast. So it must be quite difficult for your profession. In the absence of obviously having an HR person to hand, where can people get up-to-date information from? Where's the best place for them to
So I would recommend, obviously the government is updating regularly and you can sign up to their COVID-19 bulletins.
Okay.
ACAS is a really good, they've got some really good information and they're updating regularly.
Yeah, because it's signed by 6th of April.
You okay, Nadine?
Yes, so I'm just typing a question into the chat. Do you have
okay.
do you have to decide by the 6th of April?
No.
You don't, okay.
No, not at all. The furlough, I mean, the furlough has been open from, they backdated it to 1st of March, or anybody on the payroll as at the 28th, 29th of February. But it continues for 3 months and may be extended. So you may not be in a furlough position now, but at the beginning of May, you might be.
Okay,
so
thank you.
it's still available, yeah. So ACAS is a really good website. My own Face-to-Face HR has got its own coronavirus page. So there's loads of us around if anybody needs any help.
Okay, are we all done, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again, Sue, and
Thank you very much.
see you guys online soon, I hope.